This episode of Over a Barrel is brought to you by Valero. When you make the call, Valero's there to answer with 24/7 US-based customer support. Because we believe you should always have the fuel you need when you need it, right now. Coming up on Over a Barrel, gas prices are skyrocketing across portions of the country. Find out exactly where and why on this edition of Over a Barrel, which starts right now. Well, welcome to the program. I'm Matt. He's Patrick. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, wherever it is that you happen to be it Spotify, YouTube, whatever the case may be. And Patrick, hello. We've got a lot of news already beginning to develop for this particular episode of the podcast, and that starts off with gas prices skyrocketing. Let's get right in it. Where is this happening and why?
Yeah, Matt, we are seeing gas prices launch into outer space. The epicenter of this in Northern California. I will quickly try and get my screen pulled up here for those of you that are on YouTube and listening. We will explain it all. But right now, Matt, California is seeing gas prices launch. In some instances, some areas seeing gas prices up over 50 cents a gallon in the last week. Certainly pretty hefty increases there. You'll see that we pulled some of those liters up. Salinas, California, up 38 cents in the last week. Look at that list, just dominated by California refineries. All of this, Matt, happening primarily due to refinery snags, maintenance. The snags essentially entail a refinery that caught fire several weeks ago. It's essentially been fully offline since then. There are but 5 refineries in Northern California. And now with one of them down because of a fire and 2 of them undergoing maintenance, that leaves very little margin for error. And that is why wholesale gas prices have launched up. The biggest problem as well is also the transition to cleaner gasoline. Summer gasoline is rolling out in California. Matt, this is where it gets really, really convoluted. Southern and Northern California switch on different dates. Arizona switches on a different date. Nevada switches on a different date. There's essentially a lot of logistical nightmares happening in California, and essentially not enough gasoline is being produced, and that has caused the wholesale gas price to skyrocket. And unfortunately, while you see there is really not looking good with some increases, a lot of communities, Matt, of increases over 25 cents in the last week, the trend will probably remain to the upside. If you are in Northern California, you're going to see the biggest increases, potentially another 10 to 30 cents over the next week. Southern California, well, you're a little bit insulated, but you'll probably see prices going up 5 to 15 cents a gallon over the next week. The same will be true in areas like Las Vegas and Phoenix. I think the worst may be behind you in those markets, but expect further increases essentially, Matt, no matter where you are on the West Coast. And this also will touch on Oregon and Washington. If you're in any community essentially in the West Coast, you're going to see gas prices going up. The good news, if you need diesel, it's not going to affect you. And the other good news, Matt, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Wholesale prices have started to come back, but what a mess.
Mess. There's all kinds of messes in just about every direction. And it's just some of it, as you and I have talked on other podcasts, it's a natural transition this time of year. And that wouldn't necessarily qualify as a mess per se, but it's just something that motorists, we all, generally speaking, have short-term memories when it comes to that. Every year we start talking about prices increasing, and then we're all happy in the fall whenever prices suddenly start going down on a traditional year, unless there's something else weird that happens geographically speaking, geopolitically, all of that. So let me ask you this: when it comes to, like, take for example, here in the Midwest, you and I normally are both based in the Midwest. You're in one state, I'm in a different one, but now you're actually in the Southeast for the next month or two. Talk to me about some of the prices that I know I'm seeing here in the Midwest. I have seen prices jolt up, sometimes 20, 30 cents overnight. Now, just prior to us beginning on the recording of this podcast, they have dropped back down. I'm seeing prices that were several days ago, $2.79, $2.89 a gallon. I even saw one station at $2.99 a gallon. Now I'm seeing prices in my local area, $2.69. So what's the reasoning behind all of that? And are you seeing that in the Southeast?
Yeah, this is the time of year, Matt, where you're going to, to your point, you're going to see some really low prices as refiners try and get rid of that winter gasoline. Essentially, they're going to do it by offering it a deep discount. Nothing is more enticing than those low prices you mentioned. So that's a great tool that refineries can basically get rid of winter gasoline, because we are just about 2 weeks away from starting to see the first changeover. It's a multi-step process that happens from winter to summer, and we're only a couple of weeks away from making that first step. So you're going to see artificially low prices in pockets across the country. You're most likely to see that in interior areas like like when I was in Chicago. You see it in the Great Lakes because product in the inner areas of the country is essentially landlocked. The only way to get rid of it is not by exporting it like you can do on the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, and the West Coast, but you have to sell it at deep discounts. And because you use a lot of Canadian oil in the Midwest, there's a lot of deep discounting that can happen to get that gasoline out. So, we did just see prices in Indiana cycle back up to 309 today. That's a fairly low price cycle. And we're seeing, to your point, I saw some 260s, some 250s. So motorists out there that are filling their tank this time of year should take the extra 10 seconds, find those lower price stations. On my way to Florida, there was a couple pockets where I saw 249, and then you hit Florida and it was 309. So, if you're traveling for spring break, make sure you have the gas buddy app. But yeah, Matt, you're seeing a lot of discounting happening depending on where you are. Areas of the Midwest, the Corn Belt, the Rockies, Denver is going to be moving back to reformulated gasoline. They're essentially on a very cheap form of winter gasoline. And when they make that change in the next couple of months, there's going to be a lot of whiplash. There's going to be a lot of whiplash now for you and I, because the lower prices go now, a lot of that is deep discounting. Once that winter gasoline is gone, we are going to slingshot higher. And I would say 20 to 65 cents higher for most of us in the US between mid February, where we are now, and probably mid-April. That's usually when prices peak.
I tell you, a month ago, we would not have been talking about per se geopolitics and other aspects.
No.
What a dizzying time that we are seeing on that front as well. In fact, as we are recording this podcast, I'm seeing news banners on certain networks indicating that peace between Ukraine and Russia may be imminent, or something that they are particularly working out. Let's say, magic crystal ball that neither one of us happens to own, those lower thirds on the networks are all proving to be true, and something actually does happen, and peace happens. Is there anything left in the price cycle or the price factor of crude oil and fuel itself that, if something like that is goes into effect, we would see a falling price at that point? Or is it just such an old conflict at this point that really the markets are just going to be like, meh, no big deal?
No, there's a lot of potentials here. And I mean, you mentioned, the geopolitical factor. A lot of what we're going to be focusing on the next 4 to 8 weeks is not geopolitically related, right? It's the seasonal factor. But there's still a lot happening on the price of oil that's worth watching. The potential deal between Russia and Ukraine is huge if it develops. You
So
know,
you think it will have an impact on prices then?
if something
If
develops, if there's because a lot of that is going to then potentially normalize relationships again with Russia. Potentially, it may take some time depending on how the deal is crafted and what it looks like. Is it a win for Ukraine if they go back to kind of the status quo? Russia wants an optical victory here. They want to be able to declare victory, and Ukraine probably is okay with that so long as they get some of their land back, right? There's a lot that could happen here. There could be a win on all fronts. It's going to have to be delicately crafted, but if it's a win on all sides, if everyone's happy, then I would look for oil to flow back to the global market from Russia, and oil back from Russia could help really reduce prices. Trump has said drill, baby, drill, and he'll cut energy prices in half. So far, that's been elusive because you can't just wave a magic wand. But if Trump works this very delicately, Russia's oil could end up on the global market. Trump has been friendly with MBS, the Saudis. He could potentially make a deal that's good for the Saudis to pump more oil. And at the same time, if that drives oil down to $55, US oil companies would probably still be a bit profitable at $55. They probably wouldn't be happy. But these are some of the chips that could be used to cut energy prices this summer. I mean, Trump has been focused on this. Whether or not it develops, that's the $1 million question. Is Putin going to start lobbing hardballs at the US? Are they going to be difficult? Will MBS increase Saudi's oil production? I mean, we're less than 2 months away from finding out if OPEC will increase production, right? Because they cut oil production back in July of 2023 when oil dipped to 60, well, 65. So, in April, we're still due a decision on whether or not OPEC will increase production. So suddenly, Matt, if you have all the pictures here, the pieces of the puzzle are starting to align. If Trump can make a deal with Russia to end the war in Ukraine and pump more oil, if Trump can have OPEC increase production, if Trump has the Saudis increase production, suddenly there's a conceivable way that a president could have a bit of outside influence on the price of oil, and it could be just in time for summer. But all of this, we don't know.
Yeah, it's dizzying is an understatement.
And
All
there's,
right.
to
So,
your point, there's so many headlines coming out, and there's so much to
okay.
digest. I mean, I just my phone 7 minutes ago, and it was saying that, something about tariffs, breaking news, breaking news. I mean, I have 4 notifications on breaking news.
I saw for the very first time, and and some of the podcast viewers and listeners also know, because I've talked about it more than once. I worked in the news media for 25 years. I understand exactly how it works, and I know how a newsroom works. But for the very first time ever, yesterday, I saw 2 breaking news banners at the bottom of one network's screen. One was across the full bottom of the lower third, and one was in the bottom right-hand side that was something totally separate. I'm going, okay, that's new. I mean, that's how quick things are happening. So you and I have talked about tariffs. We were under a threat of tariffs, even with our good friends in Canada and Mexico. And then the next thing you know,
still on the table too.
It's been placed on pause for 30 days. But let's get into the other tariffs because it's so dizzying. I seriously, the finger to the pulse, I feel like I'm literally just like running to try to keep up. But some tariffs apparently have gone into effect globally, even with Canada, Mexico, and any of our other trading partners. But that doesn't necessarily right now impact crude oil and gasoline, natural gas, anything to do with the oil markets. We're talking things like what, steel and other tariffs that have apparently gone into effect?
Yeah, generally steel and aluminum, and there's long stories on those sectors as well. I mean, China has flooded the world with cheap steel and aluminum, and that has had a hugely negative impact on the U.S. steel and aluminum industry. And I mean, that's part of the reason why you saw companies making bids on the Japanese potentially U.S. steel tie-up is very interesting. But it just all of this really is just kind of a new world when it comes to business relations and trade ties. I mean, all of this has really shifted significantly, and there are ramifications for oil. I mean, keep in mind, global demand for oil is a function of how strong the economy is. A stronger economy, we're going to consume more oil, we're going to consume more diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. So absolutely. I think for now, though, a lot of those things are probably falling off, the forefront of many Americans who maybe are thinking, well, there's probably not an impact there. So, and to your point, tariffs on Canada and Mexico are still paused. So there's uncertainty there.
Yeah, paused. That's the key. Paused, which doesn't mean they necessarily are for sure not happening. So it was a 30-day pause.
I've gone dark, by the way.
Yeah, and so I literally I'm like here in the temples of my forehead here, trying to figure out how do we describe all of that that's potentially going to take place. You've actually had President Trump talk about literally wanting to make Canada a 51st state. He wants to bring in Greenland. He wants to take possibly back the Panama Canal. He's saying Gaza. He wants to just simply take it over and build a Middle East Riviera.
And your list? Are you checking these off? I mean,
no, I am not. But I do have multiple screens directly below my camera right now that's showing half of this as far as news headlines goes. And the key for everything, at first, you started thinking, okay, he's joking regarding Canada, but the Prime Minister of Canada is like, no, he's not joking. So it's like, wait a
Well,
second,
and,
what's
and,
going
and you
on?
also had the premier of Alberta saying, like, flying down to Mar-a-Lago and saying, no, he's serious. So,
He's serious.
you know,
So
this is part of the calculus.
don't touch that device. We've got more Over a Barrel coming up right after our sponsor, Valero.
All across America, you'll find Valero at your go-to gas station, volunteering with local charities and fueling communities 365 days a year, so you can always get where you need to be, right now.
And now for the rest of Over a Barrel. Yeah, so I mean, like, wow is the first response that I have in my brain, and then the second response is like, well, that would certainly shake things up, right? I mean, you've got a lot of differences going on there. And again, it's a finger to the pulse. It's really kind of that animal in the middle of the room that you can't really ignore, but at the same time, it's like, huh? And so you try to figure out the appropriate level of balance there to even talk about it, even during our podcast, because you're kind of thinking, okay, that just doesn't seem, that seems totally beyond the realm of what would actually happen. But at the same time, everybody involved is saying, no, he's serious. So
And, yeah.
you can't really ignore it either, even though it's like, wait a second, what are we doing? So obviously, if Canada became that, quote, 51st state, which understandingly Canadians are dead set against for the majority of, that changes things, in oil production, especially across the Midwest, but also the tariffs would as well. I mean, Patrick, how do I dissect this? I mean, dissect it for me.
I mean, Matt, I'm looking at your background thinking each one of those different colored blocks is like a different lever. And so that you would probably have 1,800 different levers in there or something ridiculous. And that's, I mean, each one of these issues is a small different lever and how it impacts things in a more significant way. But, at the end of the day, Matt, we're just going to have to keep track of it. But for now, a lot of it is just noise. A lot of it has not come to a conclusion, right? A lot of these tariffs are paused. There's probably a lot of negotiation that's happening. And next year and the years following, right? I think there's going to be more of a status quo. I think this is more of a come into the Oval Office and influence policy, significantly change the agenda. But when it comes to gas prices, all of this still really is back at the back burner of things that are impacting gas prices. I mean, we are on the cusp of seeing all of these issues we've talked about have a secondary role at best, right? A lot of this, what's coming up now is it's starting to warm up. I can't tell you what the temperature is in Chicago. I think it's still fairly cold, but
No, but
this
in
is the time
Tampa,
of year. Yeah,
where
no, of
you
course.
are.
I'm out of touch now. But this is the time of year when refineries do start to do their seasonal maintenance. People think, well, why now? Well, it's really tough in Chicago to get refinery maintenance folks out in January, the height of the year. So, you'll generally see refineries in the South doing maintenance as early as possible. We are now in shoulder season when gasoline demand is still mostly low. And when temperatures are warming up, and this is the perfect time that refineries do maintenance because demand is low. It's not as hard to do work on facilities, and generally the profitability is rather low. So refiners basically do maintenance in the fall and in the spring. But unfortunately, because a lot of refineries have the same idea, they're not able to produce as much gasoline this time of year. And that's when prices usually start to go up, is because people are going to be spring break travel. They're going to start getting out more to warmer climates. I mean, temperatures are starting to warm up now. So there's going to be more demand. And along with refinery maintenance and less supply, there's more demand. And at the same time, we're going to make it vastly more complex by starting the transition to summer gasoline. And I had a great tweet the other day. Folks that want to know how complex the changeover to summer gasoline is, I'll try and give you a little bit of a taste of this. For those of you that are following us on YouTube, there's probably going to be a little bit more ease of time. But for those listening along, I'll try to basically give you why this is such a complex time of year, why this transition matters, because I'm pulling up a tweet that I have posted. And if you'd like to follow along, this is a tweet I posted back on February 12th. What we have here in front of us is basically, Matt, this is a very localized calendar of when the specifications change for gasoline. And you'll notice there that this is only for the Midwest. This is only for the Midwest market. Primarily, there's two regions in the Midwest covered here. Chicago is its own market, which is kind of the Great Lakes. And what you'll see there in the origin is another region called Group 3. That's kind of like the Corn Belt states. So, I mean, this is just a calendar for these two states. And look at the dates there. There's a lot of dates that the transition starts already end of January. Then there's another step in February. There's two steps in February, depending on where you are. Then again in March, another one in April. So, I mean, there's a lot of steps to this process. This is not something that you just change overnight. And Matt, look at all these different specifications. It does vary based on like regular gas, sub-octane gas, premium gasoline. So, this is the complexity of the summer gasoline system that I've railed on for years. It is so complex. I mean, this is part of why gas prices go up every spring, is because the complexity of going from something that's probably a little simpler than this. It's not fully simple,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
getting the gasoline that's needed where it needs to go while refineries are doing maintenance is a nightmare.
Okay, so you're probably leading me into the final point, because I know we got to wrap here very shortly, but you're leading me right into my next question. The current and brand new administration in the White House, the Trump administration, has basically implemented several policies, and I'm curious on your thoughts on all of this, if it will actually help the price of gasoline, help the price of crude oil. One of them has been, for every new regulation, I believe he said 10 have to be eliminated out of the federal government. Then the other aspect that we have in those things are, the reduction in force for the federal government. So you have a whole bunch of departments where the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that head, Elon Musk, is saying, entire departments need to be completely eliminated. So basically, they're looking for $1 trillion or more in savings for what the federal government is spending annually on different types of programs that they've got. If you eliminate departments, you make the government substantially more financially efficient, and you're eliminating regulations. For every brand new one regulation, 10 have to go. Do you translate any of that as an economic impact, either favorably or not favorably for any of this? I mean, do you think it will have any kind of an impact on anything? To me, $1 trillion, it would have to, but your thoughts?
Yeah, and I didn't catch.
Apparently,
A
we've
lot of
lost
what you said
Patrick.
there
Nope,
because
there
I
he
had
is.
some internet. So yeah, I'm back. I'm kicking.
All right,
Fit,
let me re-ask the question
fit,
very quickly as we wrap here.
kind of sum up what you had asked there, because my internet was dicey.
Yeah, no problem. So let me go ahead and recap that for just a moment. For every new regulation that is implemented across the federal government, the new policy is 10 essentially must be eliminated. That's number one. Number two, you have the Department of Government Efficiency that is going through the entire federal government, and they're recommending eliminating multiple actual departments. They're doing a reduction in force. They're looking for at least $1 trillion or more in savings annually for what the federal government is spending. And decreasing the size of the federal government employee-wise by a lot. Does any of that, be it regulations, be it the disappearing of all these regulations, if a brand new one's put into place, a massive reduction in force for federal employees, tax cuts? I mean, there are so many things there. Does any of that have any kind of an impact, in your opinion, on crude oil, gasoline, any of that stuff?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. If they start consolidating some of these requirements, some of these antiquated regulations, I mean, there is a point that government has just gotten really big. There's all these regulations, and there's really not like a process for the government to go back and evaluate, have these had the intended effect, right? It's just layers and layers of stuff. So, I mean, if we do try to make some efficiency gains, you may actually see some of this simplified to a 21st specification standard, and that could actually be a good thing for consumers, right? Is because a lot of these very antiquated policies, have grown more complex over the years. Arizona has carved out itself, for example. So, I mean, yeah, there could be improvements. I'm not going to hold my breath, because there's probably, like some of these budget bills are, I don't know, 1,500 and 2,000 pages long. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get down to the simplification that we need. But it could go a long way to helping it make it easier for refineries to produce these different types of blends of gasoline that are required. Simplifying standards, defragmenting, which is something that you used to do to your computer, decades ago,
Yeah,
is still
I
something
still
that
do. What are you talking about?
it's still Windows. But yeah, I mean, some of these could have some improvement in policy. I mean, there's absolutely something to be said that, you hear about some of these ridiculous rules that we've had on the books for 50 years and we haven't gotten rid of, and we don't know why we have them. Some of that ultimately could help gas prices down the road. So
All right.
I think short answer is yes, but I don't know that they're going to get to a lot of these rules because there's probably a lot of really, in the weeds stuff. So let's hope so. But in the meanwhile, Matt, I guarantee you nothing is going to happen in time for the incoming jump in gas prices that's going to be happening over the next 4 to 8 weeks. So by the way, be ready for it, folks. This is going to hit everyone across the country. It's not politically aligned. This is something that happens every spring, and I'll go on record and say it's also going to mean gas prices will fall back in the fall for basically the opposite reasons. But Matt, as we wrap it up, yeah, we'll keep talking about a lot of these back burner issues. But for now, a lot of pain on the West Coast. If you're a motorist in California, Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, Washington, you're going to see gas prices probably go up quite a bit because of some of the localized refinery issues. And for the rest of us, not in those areas, I'm hopeful that it won't be a sign of what's to come for all of us. But this is the time of year that we generally do see more malfunctions at refineries as they're ongoing with maintenance. I mean, how many times, Matt, have you taken your car to the dealer, you get a phone call, by the way, we've noticed this is also wrong. That same type of thing can happen with refineries.
All right. Well, Patrick, that's going to wrap it up right now. It's thank you much for all of the insights as always. And we are going to have probably a very busy 4 years of podcasting as we go along. We may have to do more than one podcast a week on a regular basis. Who knows what could happen at this particular point? But for now, that's Over a Barrel. He's Patrick. I'm Matt. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk again coming up really soon.
So long.
This episode of Over a Barrel is brought to you by Valero. Night or day, rain or shine, Valero keeps the pumps full 24/7, 365 with a reliable fuel supply. Because keeping pumps fueled keeps business pumping and communities moving right now.